What is up everyone? Today I'm going to make a little video about the Nintendo GameCube, but more specifically it's about the PAL Nintendo GameCube and the capabilities of this system in terms of audio-video output. Now, apologies to all of the viewers that have NTSC systems and are in an NTSC region. This applies to PAL consoles only because there is quite a significant difference between the PAL systems and the NTSC systems when it comes to output and the things that I'm going to be discussing in this video today. But this video may still be of interest to you if you like retro gaming, because I'm going to bring up a few points and demonstrate a few things that are sort of a warning to potential customers of the particular cable that I'm mainly going to be focusing on today. So we're going to look at the PAL Nintendo GameCube, we're going to chat a little bit about it, and I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a warning. Now let's rewind a little bit and talk about what led me to make this video. So as you guys know, I've recently moved out. I've moved into my first home and I've been putting together my living room, my dream living room setup. Of course, my dream setup within my budget. But what I've been doing is getting all of my old favourite consoles, hooking them up to my TV and trying to get the best picture quality out of all of them. Now, I'm not the only one doing this. At the moment, getting good picture quality from retro consoles is a massively popular topic, especially around YouTube videos and forums and pretty much anyone that has an interest in buying back some of these old consoles. And I think what's contributing towards that massive craze at the moment, or not a craze, but that massive sort of peaked interest in that sort of thing, is the fact that a lot of people are buying back old consoles because retro gaming over the last 1 to 3 years has been extremely popular. Just look at the prices of all of the old systems and how they've shot up. It's absolutely crazy. And it's not just because they've increased in age. I could buy NESs and Super Nintendos and Sega Master Systems and Sega Mega Drives super cheap 5 years ago. It's not because of the age of the systems. Even things like GameCubes and stuff are really getting up there in price now, which is crazy. So retro gaming in general has had a massive boom, but of course, everyone that wants to play these consoles has some kind of modern TV, and probably a TV that's even more modern than this one. People are trying to connect them to, 1080p LED TVs where HDMI is pretty much their only input, and they're looking for the best way to connect and to avoid composite and to avoid the pesky RF aerial connection. And that's totally fair. So of course there are a lot of videos and a lot of discussions revolving around getting decent picture quality out of these systems. So here's my little contribution. I've looked a little bit at the Sega Dreamcast and the VGA box that I purchased, and I've looked a little bit at some N64 things, and we've done a few modifications to my N64. But today we're going to talk about this guy. So anyway, I'm getting a bit sidetracked. Back to my journey. My journey started with putting together my ultimate living room setup, and I basically made an incorrect assumption right at the beginning. I assumed that I could run my GameCube via S-Video. I'd seen other people do it, and I thought because I was buying an S-Video switch, it would be the easiest and most economical way for me to introduce slightly better picture quality to my GameCube experience. So I was all set for using the S-Video switch, and I mentioned this in part 1 of my setting up my living room entertainment system video, and I was told by a lot of you guys that the PAL GameCube does not support S-Video. But my disappointment lasted a very short amount of time, because after a super quick Google search, I discovered something that was total music to my ears, and that is something that I can't believe I didn't know about this system. But the PAL Nintendo GameCube natively supports RGB SCART output, which is, as I said, music to my ears. RGB SCART, if done correctly, is a fantastic interface and probably the best way of getting good video quality out of retro consoles. Now, there are better ways and pros and cons, and it really depends on ultimately the destination of the signal. What are you plugging this stuff into? But for me, RGB SCART, absolutely ideal, because I'm still using quite an old TV. Even though it's a flat screen TV, it's a 720p TV from around 2007, 2008, 40-inch Samsung, and it does have SCART inputs, component inputs, and it's just got a nice host of different input connectors, unlike modern TVs of the last few years that strip back on a load of those connections. So SCART Absolutely ideal for me. Brilliant. So the next step was shopping for a SCART cable. Now the cable that I bought at first is plugged into the GameCube right now, and we're going to take a little look at it right here. Now here it is. Unlike the GameCube component cables, it plugs into the analog output, of course. Now the GameCube is interesting with its component cables. We all know the story. The component cables cost one heck of a lot of money, and that's basically because of a couple of things. Firstly, when they were first released, there was pretty much no demand for component cables because very few people had TVs that could support component. So for that reason, Nintendo didn't even bother taking them to retail, so stores and shops and things. They kept it as an online exclusive, Nintendo Online Store exclusive. So you could only buy the component cables if you shopped online, which was much rarer than it is today, around 2003 or whenever the heck they sold them. So right from the get-go, barely anybody sold them. So that's one of the reasons why the price is so high. But possibly the main reason why the price is so high is because those cables apparently are physically impossible to replicate because they use the digital output. Nintendo have a custom digital to analog converter, custom DAC within the cable. That's why the connector is pretty bulky, within the component cable itself. Because of course component ultimately is an analog interface, whereas this is a digital output. Now it's kind of clunky using component with your GameCube anyway, because you still have to plug in the standard AV cables to get audio, and of course the cables are massively expensive. So if you're in the PAL region, there is almost, and I'm stressing the word almost here, there is almost no viable reason to buy into component. Now the only reason that I would ever buy into component, and personally I wouldn't anyway, but the only argument that I could see that would possibly I could say, yeah, fair enough, buy component, is if you're using a newer TV that has no idea what SCART is. You don't want to spend money on something like a FrameMeister that'll accurately convert SCART, because a FrameMeister is pretty much the same price as a component cable, roughly, give or take. And if GameCube is your only system that you have interest in getting good picture quality out of, then go for it, get the component cables. But if you have a multiple selection of different consoles that you want nice picture quality out of, it's such a waste of money in the PAL region because you can get SCART cables. Now in the NTSC region, you can use S-Video with your GameCubes, which is a massive improvement over composite. Now, just as a warning, with older retro consoles that output 240p, anything really, Super Nintendo, Sega Mega Drive, Sega Genesis, whatever, you'll see a huge improvement between composite and S-Video, because S-Video is much more generous to pixel definition. Every pixel becomes true to itself, and you lose nearly all of that muddy mess of colour that composite gives you. However, with this particular generation, we're talking after 240p, but pre-high definition. So we're in a transition period. So S-Video is not as kind to these systems as it is to older systems. Same goes for the N64 actually. It's a bit of S-Video doesn't look as good on 3D systems in general, in my opinion. But yeah, it's still a massive upgrade. But other than S-Video or modifying your system, component is the way to go if you want to spend that money in the NTSC region. Anyway, loads and loads of rambling again. Of course, let's talk about this cable some more. Now, when I got this cable, this is the first one I bought, like I said. I was pretty shocked because I was expecting a bit of a thicker cable from RGB SCART. Check it out, guys. This is super, super thin. And when I saw it, I was like, okay, that's not looking that great. The controller cable is nearly thicker than this cable. And I was a little bit hesitant as to the quality and the reliability of this cable. But the eBay seller had sold loads and had great reviews. So I was like, I'm going to go for it. It was £3 or £4. But right now, folks, right this second, I'm going to show you guys what this cable achieves, and something that makes using this cable extremely frustrating, at least for me. So I've just connected this system to my TV with the cheap cable that I bought first, and I've also connected it to power. But as I was setting up this system, I remembered one point that I forgot to mention, because I'm getting quite excited making this video, because I want to demonstrate this to you guys, because it's amazing how they've sold so many of these cables and they haven't had any bad reviews that I've seen. So one thing that I wanted to mention was buying into component makes a lot more sense in the NTSC region, not just because SCART isn't an option and because SCART isn't a common interface over there, but because NTSC games will boot in 480p if you hold down B at startup and you're using the component cables, which is huge, absolutely awesome. I'm extremely jealous that we didn't get that over here in the PAL region. No 480p for us. We're interlaced at best, but hey, you could have a lot worse, and the GameCube does look really, really good. So that's just one thing that I wanted to mention quickly. NTSC, you guys got 480p, so nice one. If you've got component cables, you are really, really winning there. But anyway, it's time for me to show you what I wanted to show you. So what I've been doing is booting up a few different games to try and find an example of where this problem is sort of revealed the most. And I couldn't find a game in which it was really easy to demonstrate this issue, but then I discovered that the best place for you guys to hear this problem, and yes, I did say hear, it is an audio issue, the best place to hear it is on boot up when there's no game in the system, because this problem revolves around an interesting place in games, and that is silence. Now, one of the most important things in audio, believe it or not, is good quality silence. And that means no noise in the system, no interference, so that when you're immersed in a game and you're playing and then that big dramatic thing happens or whatever and you get this moment of silence, you want it to be silent. Same in films, same when you're listening to really dynamic music where things get quiet and you want to hear the silence. Yeah, I'll talk about it some more after we boot it up, but I've got the TV nice and loud, so you guys should be able to hear exactly what I'm talking about. So take a listen to this, folks. So there we have it. Hopefully you guys heard that. If you didn't, I'll do it again in a minute with the volume turned even higher. But first, I'll explain what it is. Now, every time, and it does depend on what's on the screen at that moment, because it's interference between the audio and video signal, because this cheap cable is not shielded properly. Now, as you guys know, SCART carries both audio and video, and it's an analog interface, 100% analog through and through. So interference does occur when shielding is of less than adequate quality. So that's a really, really common thing in cheap SCART cables, and it plagues this cable to no end. So what happens is, when the system boots up, every time you have a bit of silence, and not just when the system boots up, but in the game in general, you have different varying degrees of background noise and sort of electrical buzzing noise, depending on what's on the screen, and it gets louder and quieter, louder and quieter. And the best place for you to hear it on the boot up is just after it's booted up and it does the GameCube logo, and before it goes into the menu, you hear this unbelievable loud racket, horrible interference. And also, when the system is booting up initially, as soon as I press the button, you will hear the interference from the get-go, because it's not just in silence, it's throughout the entire game, the entire time the console is powered on, because even just any kind of signal going through the AV cable, you can hear it in the audio because the shielding is not that great. Like I said, this is a problem for cheap SCART cables, and this is definitely a massive problem here. So I'm going to turn up the volume again, and I'm going to show you guys again, if it lets me turn it up. There we have it. Hang on a second, folks, just got to pause. So there's the volume turned up. If you take one more listen to this issue. as you guys can hear, it's really, really bad. You can hear it clearly. That interference is basically the same volume as the music. It's buzzing away there like just really loud. And as you can hear, the interference sort of waves in and out as the video signal changes. Now that is really, really frustrating, and personally I think that would bother anyone. I don't think it's just me. It sounds awful. And if you still can't quite hear it, if you're listening with you know, your phone speakers or something and you can't hear it, it's basically comparable to if you've ever pulled out an aux cable or a jack cable or any kind of cable like that, and the source is still switched on, and you hear that interference when you pull that cable out of the jack, and when you start touching it with your thumb or whatever, that sort of earthy, electrical, buzzing, humming kind of sound is exactly what this is. Just, you know, electrical interference in audio. It sounds awful. So, that's the first cable. What did I do then? I then bought my second cable, and thankfully I didn't need to go any further in my search. Now, just looking at it straight away, you guys can probably not tell any kind of difference. This is by far not the highest quality cable in the world. Now what I'm going to do is just unplug the other one from the back of the system here and bring it over. Now this new cable, the second cable, is a little tiny bit thicker than the other cable. I can barely see it, I can only just sort of feel it. But this one, the better one, is tiny bit thicker. And I bought this cable from consolegoods.co.uk, which is where I bought my Dreamcast VGA box. It's where I bought my N64S video cables, and it's generally where I've had fantastic luck with cables that are correct for PAL systems. So I'll link Console Goods once again in the video description. Now, before I go any further, I will say that I'm very interested in looking out on eBay and picking up the official Nintendo SCART cable, and I want to make another video where I do a direct comparison between these three cables, looking at the video signal as well, because I will say right from the get-go that I was expecting a little better from the video quality out of RGB SCART. It could be the GameCube itself, I have no idea, and it looks great, it looks better than composite, but for being RGB, I was expecting a little bit more, just a little bit more. I expect it to look great on a standard definition CRT TV, but it's not looking that great on either of my TVs. But again, not a big disappointment. All I want to do is get my hands on the official Nintendo cable to see if there are any differences. But for now, I'm holding this cable as the best cable that I own. And I'm going to show you the differences in audio right now. So I'm going to plug this one into the TV, leave the TV at the exact same volume, and let you guys be the judge of the audio. So I have the good quality cable connected, and I'm going to boot up the system, and you guys should hear an instant difference. Now, of course, there'll still be some noise because there's a certain noise floor to the TV and to the connector in general, and interference from other electrical devices in the room, etc. But we're listening out for the peaks and troughs, you know, where it goes crazy interference and then goes down, and crazy interference and goes down, and stuff like that. And you'll hear generally way less interference anyway. So let's take a little listen to the good quality cable. So it sounds even better than I thought it would in comparison. After the Nintendo GameCube logo with the other cable, it was horrendous quality, as you guys know. But with this one, absolutely lovely. Crystal clear, really nice audio. I've been thinking about ways that I can record this audio directly for you guys, and while making this video I decided that the best way to do it is just to use the microphone in the camera, just as I have done. So if that turns out worse than I thought it would, I'll put a couple of notes in editing right now if you couldn't hear it, but if it's obvious I won't need to write anything, because I thought about ways to directly record the SCART audio, and any way that I can do it involves a couple, at least one or two conversions before I can use it with my audio interface, and that would introduce more noise into the path, and it wouldn't be an accurate representation because you're not exactly going to hear direct input audio from a console like this anyway. You're going to hear the audio coming out of your TV. So hopefully the camera has captured it as well as my ears in the room can hear it. The microphone on this camera is generally pretty good anyway. So this is a first of maybe a couple of videos revolving around this topic. It's awesome that the Nintendo GameCube, the PAL Nintendo GameCube, can output native RGB SCART. It's a really, really cool thing because it's a cheap and easy way to get the best video quality without modification out of the GameCube, and it avoids faffing around with extremely expensive component cables and loads of cable mess coming out the back of your GameCube to try and get audio and video at the same time. Plus, in the PAL region, as I said, there's no benefit of 480p, so it's even harder to spend that money anyway. So SCART, really good stuff. But the warning is, the main bottom line of this entire video is be careful of cheap eBay cables. They lack shielding, and I would imagine that if the audio sounds that bad, then the video could potentially suffer in a high interference environment. I didn't notice any differences in particular between the video of my cheap cable and my more expensive cable, which by the way is only about £8 or £9 from Console Goods, I think, so it's about double the price but still really, really cheap. I didn't see any video differences, but I haven't looked at them side by side because obviously I'd have to have two identical TVs and stuff, and it's impossible for me to capture SCART into my computer without some kind of conversion. That's one really annoying aspect and something that's kind of slowing me down while trying to make these comparison videos. But I'm not going to let that stop me. I still want to get my hands on an official Nintendo SCART cable. They tend to go on eBay for around £30 or £40 boxed. But I hope to get an unboxed one if they pop up for quite a bit cheaper than that, just to make some comparisons, and then probably, because it will be a bit better quality than this one, I'll use it as my main cable. But it may not be. This may be as good as we're going to get, but I will say one thing, just from eyeballing it, the official Nintendo SCART cable is a lot thicker than even this one from Console Goods. Even though this one's thicker than the cheap eBay one, I was still a little bit disappointed at the gauge of cable that it uses, you know, to carry full RGB. I don't even know if it's proper RGB. I can't confirm that until I know how good the official cable looks. So this video has been revolving around audio. I hope you found it useful. If anyone has any further questions, don't hesitate to ask in the comment sections. I'll always do my best to help, and hopefully you'll be seeing another video around this topic when I get my hands on the next cable. So thank you very much for watching, everyone, and as always, I'll see you in the next video, which will hopefully be really soon.